Bunnicula, the story about a vampire bunny. Sounds interesting. Let's check it out. Welcome to Panels in Progress, and this is another episode of the first chapter. And on today's episode, we are checking out Bunnicula, the graphic novel, illustrated by Stephen Gilpin, based on the novel by Deborah and James Howe. And I believe Andrew Duncan assisted with the translation between the novel and the graphic novel. Let me give you a little bit of backstory about this one. I've heard of Bunnicula a long time ago. And when I was a young kid, my older sister, had these books. They were called Bunnicula, and I knew it was about vampires and bunnies, and I didn't understand in my little kid brain that these were kids' books. I thought they were going to be super horror books because whenever you normally hear about vampires, you also hear of horrific things that are associated with vampires. So even though I was always curious about the series, I stayed away from it when I was a kid because I was scared. So fast forward many years later, they now have a graphic novel for the book. And I decided it was $5 at Half Price Books. Why not check it out and see what it's all about? Let's begin. I will say, when the book started, I had no idea that it was actually starting immediately, because the first page is a note from the editor. So I was like, oh, this is from the writers of the story. Okay, let me read this, even though it has the picture of a dog. It then goes on to more from the letter of the story, and it's from Harold. And that's where you actually find out that Harold is a dog. And so this story is actually told from the perspective of the pets. Chapter 1, the arrival, starts where you're basically just looking at the house on a rainy day, and Harold is just setting the scene. I will say that this comic is more of, it is a really great bridge between prose writing and comics, because it's more like an illustrated novel instead of a graphic novel. With these 2 pages, Harold is explaining his life as a dog and how his best friend is the cat, and kind of the things that the cat is afraid of. He's introducing that he heard a sound, the family is coming home, and then he introduces us to the family. Mr. Monroe, Mrs. Monroe, Pete, and Toby, they're soaking wet from being outside as there is a thunderstorm going on. And then, on this next page, during the crack of lightning, we see that Mr. Monroe has a box in his hands with these 2 little glowing eyes looking out of it. And I think this is a great introduction to the bunny, because the parents and the family, they're excited about it, but you can see like the doom and forbidding gloom from just that black space with those 2 little red eyes. During this scene, I love how, since it's told from the dog's perspective, usually the views are a lot lower than expected. Like, you see his shoes, the wet shoes and things like that. And you can see that the family is arguing about where they're going to put the bunny, whose room is he going to sleep in, who's going to carry it. Typical kids things that they would argue about because they're so excited about this new pet. Harold's not happy about this because he was the favorite pet, and Chester himself is a chosen pet around there as well. He also talks about how the humans, the family, they don't talk to them like they're animals. They talk to them like they're people. And so on this spread, we find out that how they found the rabbit was at the movie theater, and it was just a discarded box left in the seat, and he almost sat on the box. And they happened to be watching the movie Dracula while they found him. So then the kids are still excited about the rabbit, and they're introducing him to the dog and the cat. There was a strange language on the tag that was around the rabbit's neck, which somehow the dog knew how to decipher that it was from the Carpathian Mountains, and it roughly said, "Take good care of my baby." As the family is trying to decide who's going to do what and get food for the rabbit, they are introduced to him. And then, of course, as kids are, they were fighting about who was going to bring the rabbit's cage up to the stairs, and then the cage got dropped and everything was a mess, and the parents were just trying to sort it out. But the cat and the dog decided, because the dog was worried, like, oh, I don't want to share my food, and the cat was like, I don't want to share my milk with a rabbit, because they didn't know what the bunny would eat. And so as they are trying to set up the cage and figure out what room the rabbit's gonna sleep in, they finally get to the point where they're like, okay, we need a name for this rabbit. And then, of course, the mom's not really ready to name him, but the kids are like, no, he needs a name right now. And then the dog believes that naming the pet is very important, and he was almost called Fluffy. And then the mom immediately says, okay, let's call him Fluffy. And in this story, you'll also realize that the dog kind of breaks the fourth wall, because the dog is telling the story and talking to you at the same time as he is involved with whatever's going on inside the house. So then they start realizing that, hey, we found him at the movie theater. We found him at a Dracula movie. Let's call him Dracula. And then the other brother's like, that's a really stupid name. And of course, they start to argue again. No, it's not. And anyway, I found him, so I should get to name him. Mom, you're not going to let Toby name him, are you? That's favoritism, and I'll be traumatized for life. And I love just the little reactions that the kids are having. I feel like in this story, the kids are drawn very kid-like as far as how they would behave. The kids are still arguing. Finally, the mother, being the voice of reason, says, we'll compromise. He's a bunny, and we found him at a Dracula movie, so we'll call him Bunnicula. Everybody happy? And then, of course, they're both happy. And then you get to see, and that's how our newest arrival came to be known as Bunnicula. And I just love how they did this like old style movie poster for Bunnicula. It's just great. It's just a great setup, and I think it's just a good way to introduce a character. This first chapter was just all about what this story, it was basically setting the pace and the tone and expectations for what you could expect for this story. And that was the end of the first chapter. So from the first chapter, even though like literally it was just the introduction to the characters, I think they did a really good job of setting the tone, setting the pace, and setting your expectations for what to expect. I loved the little hint of something sinister when it came to Bunnicula being in that box with those little red eyes. I think it was told in a great way, and I was equally interested to keep reading. I wanted to see how they introduced the vampirism part of the bunny and how that worked. And I can say that after reading it further, like, the story is a little bit absurd, but it's a great story nonetheless. So please check it out. Let me know what you thought about it. And also, I just kind of want to put this here because I don't know where else I'm going to say this, but the reason that I show such a wide variety of comics and manga from all ages and all genres is because I think we need to see, and we need that reminder that there's not just one way to make a comic, and there's not just one way to tell a story. I know, since I'm, like I said, I'm still finding my own style, still developing my own abilities, and seeing the different variations of how characters are created, how stories are told, how manga is told, how things work. There's wide scale from the most amazing of amazing art to a very simplistic artwork, but it still gets the story across. And I think all of them are very valid in ways of telling a story. So think of this, my first chapter series, as well as my panel deep dives. Check those out if you haven't already. Think of these episodes as a way to expand your vision of what it means to make comics, because there isn't a wrong way to make comics. So, just food for thought. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have heard of this series or have heard of the original book series, let me know in the comment section below. What do you guys think of it? I'll see you guys next time.